Welcome to Guest of the Year. I'm the host. My name's Mike. Today's guest setlist curator is Tom from GratefulStats.com. Grateful Stats is a database of Grateful Dead shows with deep search tools and advanced stats, including song sequences and durations. To mine the database's full depths, there's a Patreon that helps cover hosting fees, and any additional revenue is donated to charities like the Rex Foundation, Headcount, and TC's medical bills. However, this week only, Tom has generously made the site's full capabilities free to access. There's a link to the site in the show notes. Welcome, Tom.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Here's how the game works. We'll play the first part of a Grateful Dead live track, and each contestant will use the messaging system to silently guess which year the performance is from. Contestants who are all in a video conference together can message in their guesses at any time during the clip or in the 10 seconds after it concludes. We have 3 contestants today, and whoever is the least number of years off over 5 tracks wins and continues on to next week. Our returning champ Charles is here, and we'll meet the rest of the Deadheads in a moment, but first, without further ado, the Grateful Dead. It was a half step at Nassau and Uniondale, New York on March 27th, 1985. The taper was Joe D'Amico. Tom, tell us about that half step.
So half step for me is just a semi-obsession or just a really impressive and a different kind of song than almost anything else Jerry wrote. It's got these wonderful moods, and it's one of the few that I know of songs where the chorus has a certain chord pattern and the solo has a different one. There's a few chords that are different in there. There's a D minor, there's a B, which of course is sort of a common pattern in like Spanish music, but it's just wonderful. And I can't tell you how long it took me to play the solo and not have it be a train wreck because I was playing over the wrong chord pattern. Until I really got onto YouTube and I stopped, I did almost like we used to do in the old days with the recorder or with the tape player, stop and rewind and all this kind of stuff. And the lead at the end is just wonderful. It's that sort of, that everybody's improvising at the same time jazz, kind of like playing in the band was. But the end of half step is that feeling to me.
When did you realize there was a Grateful Dead database void that you wanted to fill with Grateful Stats?
Well, like playing the guitar, I kind of taught myself software development, when I was younger, and it just developed over the decades into a career. Of course, it started a long time ago, but as a software developer, you do like a little bit of some big thing. And I did a lot of little bits, mostly in kind of one area, a little bit in the front end, but mostly kind of channeled. So I really wanted to be able to do the whole thing. Not necessarily to, have a position working, doing full stack, but I wanted to be like a full stack coder, which is everything, front end, middle tier, database, caching, all that stuff. So I did a few projects. And when the pandemic started, I remember my family was watching the Tiger King and I was coding stuff. So I did like a county by county COVID analysis. So you couldn't really get the individual county data except going to the county site. So the New York Times had the data out, and I took that and I put it together, and I thought, well, this is interesting. I learned how to do a bunch of different things. And I thought, boy, these queries are pretty straightforward. I've written more complicated queries in my job, than I would have to do to pull data out of a normalized database of Grateful Dead shows. So I did. I started to find the data, and I did find it. This one gentleman has GitHub. Let's just say I had to make a lot of corrections, and I did over the last, 5, 6 years, hundreds of corrections. But I took that data and I put it into a format that I could use, and I developed the middle tier and the front end, and I put it out there. And I thought, well, let's see what happens. So I got some really good feedback from folks, and I have one individual who has written me many times, and she's kind of my QA person. She really helps me a lot. She's obviously really interested in, the data, and it's been a lot of fun. And so about 5 years in, I paid for the whole thing myself, and I knew how many people were visiting, every week, really. And it was a lot. And I thought, and I've had a page up there, like a QR code, just to, $5 here, $7 there, whatever you want. And I had 4 or 5 people donate over 5 years. And, I'm paying for this thing every month. And I thought, there's a lot of people. So I don't like advertising, and I still like the model of people volunteering to pay. So I'm thinking, I need to make this really cheap, but just make it so that, and whatever I make above those fees, I'm not going to keep. That's, I don't feel like I own this data. I own some of the IP, or I feel like the queries and kind of how I did it. I do feel some, ownership or, love, I guess, for that kind of stuff. But I don't feel like I own the data at all. And I didn't want to make any money on this. So I give away what is extra after the hosting fees. And that was kind of my plan all along. It's like, all right, I need to cover this. And then whatever's extra, I'm going to give away.
Did you notice a trend in the errors from the original data set that you imported?
Well, I noticed several things myself as I was spelunking through the data. Most of 71 was missing, a whole bunch of 70. Death Don't Have No Mercy was missing a lot of times. My QA person pointed that out to me, and she had real detailed information, which is very helpful. So anybody who wants to send in corrections, the more detail, the better. Some shows were missing entire sets, which sort of happens. That I can kind of see, because there's some contention about some of the shows about what really happened, and whether a lot of times there's an early show and a late show in the early 70s, in like 69, 70, 71. So, and they just got a little mixed up over the years. And there's folks who are way better at this than I am, who can give me the details and have. And again, I appreciate that.
What sources do corrections generally come from? And have you ever had to just make a judgment call because there is no consensus on a specific show or set list?
Sometimes. A lot of folks use dead.net. Jerrybase comes up quite a bit. You guys have probably heard of that one. I try to find multiple sources. I also use archive.org if the show is new enough. By new, I mean 68 plus. If it's got a couple of recordings from some sources on archive.org, I'll kind of use that as a provenance or kind of an archival reference as well.
Thank you, Tom. Only one person got it, our returning champ, Charles, 85. Charles is 45 from Wellsville, New York. How'd you figure out 85, Charles?
So the first note I wrote down was fast pace. That was a pretty good clip for half step. Usually it's a little more loping. Yeah, so just had kind of a mid-80s tempo, mid-80s, the quality of the recording, that's where I went with 85.
Archit is 24 from Riverside. He guessed 87. 2 years off Archit right there. Why 87?
I picked 85 to begin with, and I had that in the messaging system just ready to hit send. And I'm like, no, I want to hear the Across the Rio Grande part a little bit. I wanted to see if the lyrics started immediately or if there was a bit of an instrumental in there. And I think Tom was right, like when you really get to study these songs, I guess from a guitar perspective, right? Like I play all the bobby parts and stuff in bands and on YouTube and stuff. And over time you get to recognize patterns, right? Like this descending line from A minor. Da, 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 da. That comes up in Music Never Stopped. That comes up also in the early Mind Left Body jams from '74. And your brain really picks up like, oh yeah, Bob's doing that part, or no, he got that part, Brent got this part. So I was trying to split it up in my head. And I think all I have this whole episode is just going off of Bob tone pretty much. And I knew it was 85, somewhere between 85 to 87. But I'm like, no, I'll just play the game a little bit. Let me go a little bit towards the later year. Some of those Brent tones, some of that organ stuff just sounded a little towards 88. But it was a shot in the dark. But you say 85, and I'm like, yeah, no, that's very clearly 85. So it's like, why did I move off of it? Yeah.
Do you try to play the Bob parts like Bob?
I think a lot of people do, but I think if people really, really only play the Bob stuff, you get a little hemmed in, right? And I think there's this old John Mayer quote. He's like, well, if you know exactly what I'm doing, you have a good idea of the song, but you might not have a good idea of the guitar. And I think, there's a lot of folks on YouTube who do the boppy part stuff. Like, oh, see if you pause right here and they play it 10 times, you hear him do that pull off. And they're like, here's exactly how you can do that, right? And they are very accurate in what they're trying to do. But then when you're playing it live and you're like, okay, we're going to go Help on the Way, Mississippi Half Step into Franklin's Tower. What are you going to use as a reference for that? You are truly improvising as the band did at one point. And I think that's the sort of appreciation I have with certain Dead songs. Some of them just are going to sound very similar, right? Like I'm always going to do that part on El Paso. I'm always going to do that part on Me and My Uncle. But then you get to like certain Slipknot's, Eyes of the World 74 jams, and it's like, no, I can actually experiment a little bit, just like the band originally did. We can stretch out and I can play stuff that I would play, not stuff that necessarily Bob would play. But it's like Mad Libs, those old cartoons where they have like the whole sentence given, but you give it the noun, you give it the verb, and that's what gives it character, right? I see a lot of these Grateful Dead songs, especially the jam components, exactly like that. We all know we're going to come into that da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, but how we get there is completely up to us. And we can play whatever we want that gives it that character. And I think sometimes a lot of folks get really hemmed in on trying to play exactly what Bob played. But it's like, no, what would you play? What do you want to do in that part? We already know where we're going, but what are you going to do right now? And I think I like that level of improvisation when playing live.
That is what Jerry always said. He's like, don't copy us, do your own thing. So I agree with you. It's like, yeah, I do my own thing. I play their music, but, we sometimes change keys. More of that is for voicing. I play with this one guy a lot, and, he's like, well, how should we do this? I'm like, we should do it how we want, how it sounds good to us, See, I totally agree with you, what you're saying.
Charles, you also play guitar, correct?
I do, yeah. I've been in multiple bands over the last 30 years, mostly electric guitar, lead guitar. I was in a bluegrass band for a while, played bass for a while. Now I'm just doing kind of a solo acoustic thing, but yeah, I've studied it a little bit. And to Tom's point, like half step is a very interesting chord progression, and that always got me when they do the lead, and it's like, oh crap, I just figured out the verse, which was difficult. No, that's not what they're soloing over.
Good group tonight, Jesus. Charlie is 36 from Beacon, New York. He has a 2-week-old at home. Thanks for being here, Charlie. You guessed 1988. Tell us about 88.
Well, based on everyone else's responses, I hope you guys are ready for the least competent responses coming from me tonight. I personally thought Jerry's voice was just like a little bit more emphatic. It sounded a little bit stronger, which is why I was like, I could push like an 87, 88. And that's kind of it.
Cool. Let's hear Tom's second pick.
Yeah.
Revolution at MSG in New York on October 12th, 1983. The taper was DeWeese. Tell us about that. Nice Beatles cover.
Yeah, well, the significance for me is that I was at this show. I live in Indiana now. I've lived here for many years, but I grew up in Long Island. So the first many shows I saw were in that area, Nassau, Madison Square Garden. I was in Saratoga. So I was at the show. I was in high school, and it was just a total surprise. And we were like, what? You know, we at the time, my buddies and I kind of knew what to expect, but they came out with Revolution, and you can use Grateful Stats and see when they played it before, you know, the number of days, you know, since it was played and all that kind of stuff. But it was just such a great surprise. And we were like, oh, this is awesome. This is why, you know, we do this, you know, this is just terrific.
Going back to Grateful Stats and coding, are you concerned about the future of employment in the coding sector as a consequence of AI?
I am not. I've seen so many changes in software engineering over the years. It evolves and things get better, and you have to let go of some things. Nobody writes in bits and bytes the way they did in the 50s and 60s anymore, right? We all write in these higher level languages because they've evolved such. And, you know, one statement does a lot more stuff than it used to. I really think, you know, humans will evolve to do other things. Humans and, you know, mammals in general are among the most adaptable things on Earth. As things change, we will figure out ways to make ourselves necessary. Now, there are some what economists call externalities, right? There's some negative stuff about this, the amount of energy that it uses. I run some LLMs on my MacBook that I just got, and the fan goes bananas. So, yeah, there's some negative externalities, but you know, there's negative externalities and positive externalities to everything. So you have to kind of look at history and the evolution of all this stuff and use that perspective and not doom and gloom, because we will change as things change.
How sure are you that you're right about that?
I'm sure that nothing stays the same. I'm 100% sure that nothing stays the same, and that if you plan on staying the same, you're going to have a problem fitting into the future.
Well, one thing that's consistent is Charles being really good at Guess the Year. He nailed it 83, as did Charlie. Archie guessed 86. Charles, nice pull. Why 83?
Well, I mean, I knew that the opening riff, it was Revolution. And I was thinking to myself, okay, well, I don't think they played Revolution in the 70s. Tom would, being the stats guy, might know, but and in the mid 80s, they really started putting in a lot of covers, like, why don't we do it in the road? And so at first I thought 85, but I'm like, there's no way he's going to do 85 twice in a row. And, you know, just some of the tonality things, like it seemed to me it was a little bit earlier than 85 than later. Like I could have very easily gone to 87. 87 was in my head.
Charlie, also incredibly nice pull.
I mean, that's just a shooting star of a guess. I was certain that they hadn't played it until the 80s. And then I was like, this could be super suspicious with like, maybe we're just going to run 85s all game. So then I started at 85 and I was like, feels a little too sloppy for me right now. So I dropped it down and I was like, 84 seems too suspicious. So let's just go to 83.
Wow. Playing the curator, playing the game. I love it, Charlie. I love that. Archit, 86.
Yikes. Yeah, I don't know. I was thinking 85 as well, but I'm like, no, there's not going to be two 85s in a row. But I guess, I don't know, maybe same tonality thing. I just wanted to push it up a little bit further, but yeah, no, 83 sounds good. I'd like to lock that in. So, yeah.
Archit, how'd you get into the Dead?
Yeah, great question. I feel like a lot of folks either, you know, like saw the Dead or like inherited like a crazy music taste from their parents. And my parents are immigrants. They came in the late 90s. I was born way after Jerry passed, you know. And it's just, I discovered everything on my own. It just came from my own exploration. As like a 8 or 9-year-old, I was listening to like all the Beatles songs. I loved Crosby, Stills, Nash by the time I was 13, 14. And then you find these like genealogies that go into each other, you know, like, oh, Graham Nash bought Jerry Alligator, or they learned how to sing off of Teach Your Children. And it's little stuff like that. And eventually I realized that like everyone who listens to the Grateful Dead, they are their own types of historians. Like I studied history in college, and it's just so difficult to find people who talk about stuff like it's baseball stats. And I'm like, no, I think every Deadhead is also a historian because you got to know when was played or what was played when. And then for those who are really deep into the guitar stuff, like Jay from Jerry Tone Store, he's like, yeah, this pick is Tiger's first appearance. And it's like, you can't really give that level of recommendation to folks who just didn't know that.
Why did you gravitate towards the Bobby parts when you're creating this channel? And what is the channel called?
It's just under my name. It's just Archit Mahale, which is my first name and last name. And I think I'm just shy of like 100 subscribers. We'll get there soon. And I think the Bobby parts, I don't know. It's just that like, I think in that Netflix documentary, he's like, if you don't have an ego, you can be the best number two. And that line really kind of stuck with me. And I think part of it also comes down to the type of music I was interested in when I first picked up the guitar. Like the Grateful Dead did not make me pick up the guitar. It was Neil Young's like strumming patterns. Like, yeah, I want to play Cowgirl in the Sand. I want to play Truth Be Known and all these different types of songs. And I realized that this whole idea of just using chords and getting to know chords, right? I got to know how to play my favorite songs, but I also got to know how to play the guitar, right? And this D chord in this song is the same D chord in that song. And oh, I know that. And it's like you're ear training yourself. And I think when I discovered the Grateful Dead, I'm like, yeah, I don't have to play the whole chord. And harkening back to Mississippi Half Step, Bob has really, really weird parts. And he's a lot of the time, he's not even playing full chords. He's just playing individual counterpoints. That can be a really weird learning curve for folks to understand if they just come from strumming all 6 strings and playing every chord all the way through. Like even songs with really weird progressions like Saint of Circumstance or Help on the Way, these chords, these positions are just, it makes the song. And these are not chords you can use in very other many contexts, even within like, I don't know, 21st century pop music, right? And I think that level of intensity is just, it really, really intrigued me. And my point is like 100% proven through the recent playing in the band tool that the Dead released. And you can listen to like Veneta stuff and the studio stuff, and you can just mute Bob. And it's like, no, that is not the Grateful Dead without Bob. The whole thing only works if everyone is doing their own part, but their own part will vary every single night. And I think that level of improvisation is just great. It's fantastic.
Thanks, Archit. I can't wait to follow your channel. Archit has 5, Charlie has 3, Charles is in first place with 0. Let's hear Tom's third pick. Big River, Stanley Theater in New Jersey on September 28th, 1972. Tom, nice pick.
Thank you. Yeah, so it's hard to find a bad Big River from that time period, really from all the 70s. I think they're all just terrific. So I'd, of course, heard the Dead's version way before I heard Johnny Cash's version. And the Dead's version just rocks. I mean, it's just amazing. So there's a bar here in Indianapolis called the Mousetrap, which is a Grateful Dead themed bar. It's not too far from where I live, and they do a bluegrass jam every Sunday night. And I've been doing it about 4-ish years or so, 4.5 years. And I started playing this song, and we all pass around solos. It's all very bluegrassy. It sounds good. It's a great song. but it just doesn't have that drive, that rock and roll drive that you have when the Dead play it. And I've got to say, it's the drums. I'm not a percussionist, but the drums of this song just drives it. And I guess I picked it because I love the way the Dead do this. I love Bobby's part. I love Jerry's part. Phil is right in there. The song just drives, and I almost can't get enough of it. So I started playing it at the Mousetrap, and it just doesn't have that rock and roll feel. I try to bring it out. I sing and I get everything going, and it's fun. Everybody claps at the end. It just doesn't have that, that rock and roll type drive, which is not how it was written. Yeah, right. It was written kind of as a country song, right? And I think it works well as that, but it works well as a rock and roll song too.
When you're in a jam situation like that, is there a certain repertoire that everyone knows, or can you be like, all right, let's play Althea, everyone?
Well, it's funny you should mention that. There is a guy who plays Althea, and a bunch of us who, of course, know it, play it with him, but some people do sit out. So in a bluegrass jam, you really should do pretty basic stuff. Bluegrass is, it's wonderful, but a lot of it is 1-3-5. You can almost smell where the next chord's going to be. There's songs that are like jam busters, which just have too many chords. We have folks who try to play certain tunes that are, sort of jazz standards that are lovely songs, but, you're not going to get the major ninth chords in a bluegrass jam anywhere, So yes, there are jam buster songs that we usually try to shy away from. So to answer your question, yes, there is an etiquette. You shouldn't make it too complicated. And if it's got some wacky chords in it, you need to call those out and just make sure that people of all skill levels can follow along.
Awesome. Well, Charles was closest, 1973. Charles, what were you thinking there?
Man, the guitar tone really sounded like his Strat. So I kind of was thinking 72, but I don't know if they played Big River that much in 72. And then I heard the fat bass. I heard the fat kind of drum sound. So it was kind of maybe pre-Wallace sound. It definitely sounded like an early Big River to me, and it didn't sound like 72 totally, except for Jerry's guitar. So I went 73.
Archit was next closest, 76.
Yeah, I've heard so many Big Rivers from like 74, and Bob is just shouting the lyrics, and he has so much like husk in his voice. And I'm like thinking about it after I submitted it. I had 72 with 7 question marks after it for almost like a minute. And then last second, I put 76. It was a shot in the dark. Yeah. I'm acting like I got it right. No, it was a shot in the dark for an incorrect answer. But yeah.
And Charlie, 81.
Okay. Phil was really loud. I thought Jerry potentially sounded a little tinny, which is where I was kind of leaning towards a 76, 77 because of the bean. And then I was like, nah, this is going to be something kooky, and it has to still be in the 80s. So unfortunately, it worked for me on the second song, but it did not work for me on this. I was two in my head.
Sure. How'd you get into the Dead, Charlie?
Well, a lot of people, kind of as Archit has mentioned, have like someone pass it down to them, or they have like a cool older brother. I have a very cool little brother. I spent the majority of my life passing things down to him, but the Dead is something that he gave me. I grew up like very old school hardcore punk, straight edge, very just like loud, angry for the most part kind of music. And then in college, in like early 20s, I lost myself to just a lot of drugs. So drug music. Yeah, my little brother just like never gave up. He pushed very hard. And once the seal broke, it was a flood. So it kind of has been nonstop ever since. I'll be sober for 7 years this summer. And I feel like for a lot of my life, I probably was like performing and acting in a way that, wasn't really true to myself. And that could go as far as music, what I was listening to, why I was listening to it, what I was participating in. And within the last like 3 or 4 years, mostly due to this music, it's like, I feel like, oh, this is kind of who I this is who I was always supposed to be. I just didn't really know it until I like had to go through some dumb shit to get there. But it's just like all encompassing of my life now. And as Mike, as you know, my wife and I have a business in Cold Spring, New York, and we typically could only play like 77 because we didn't want to scare away too many people. We wanted to keep it mellow. But when my wife got pregnant and we were running the shop and it was super busy, I was playing like 25-minute Viola Lee blues. So like we definitely like crossed a boundary where things became much more acceptable and appropriate. But all that to say that I think the music just makes me feel more comfortable with like who I am as an individual. And it took me 32 or 33 years to kind of start to figure that out. So I always like have regrets that I didn't get into it sooner, but I just try to make up for lost time every day.
It seems like the music comes when it's supposed to, you know?
I agree.
Yeah, Mundane, you like go in there and you build your own candle scent, right?
That's correct.
Who's manning the shop while you have a baby at home?
The shop is unmanned.
Wow.
Yeah,
Good,
so
dude, good. Take a second.
yeah, I know. I'm itching to get back in there, only just based on finances. But you know what's interesting is that when Alexandra we first found out she was pregnant and she wasn't feeling that great, I was at the shop by myself. And I was like, okay, now I could kind of like let the freak flag fly and just kind of play whatever. And some of the highest grossing days that we've ever had has been playing just like Dick's Picks one on from, 10 in the morning or 11 in the morning till 5 or 6 o'clock at night. But the shop is in like the top 0.5% of Grateful Dead listeners on Spotify.
Hell yes. I love it. I'll put Mundane's link in the show notes as well as Archit's YouTube page. Okay, Charles has a healthy lead. Let's hear Tom's fourth selection. Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds at Deer Creek in Noblesville, Indiana on June 23rd, 1993. The taper was Jason Greenberg. The transfer was one Charlie Miller. Tom, a local show.
Yeah, so you can guess there's another theme is that I was at this show too. My buddy from New York, my high school friend who we kind of got into the Dead together, he came out for whatever shows they played here and stayed with me and we had a good time. It was a total surprise. So even though there is a Beatles theme, it's more the surprise theme, I think.
Okay, sorry. I have one more Bluegrass Jam question. Has anyone brought any like crazy instruments?
Well, you know what? We have a guy come who plays the piccolo trumpet, and he's terrific. He can just come up with these wonderful solos, and it just fits perfectly. We have harmonica, of course, which I guess is not so unusual. We had a saxophone come last weekend. we've had flute players, classical violinists who were trying to break out of that mold. Yeah, it's an interesting mix.
When you go, obviously you take it seriously, but do you take it so seriously that you kind of critique your playing after each song or after the jam?
Oh, after each solo, I think, man, I really trashed that one.
Yeah,
I-
it's pretty much immediate.
yeah,
Yeah, believe me, especially in bluegrass.
yeah. But no one is judging. Everyone is very forgiving, and it's like you do what you like, and if you don't like it, that's only you. But they're going to move on to the next person, and so sometimes you're glad. Sometimes you hit it. At least for me, sometimes I can just hit it, and like we always do. Almost every week, we'll do me and my uncle, and sometimes I can hit a solo and get the end to where it's right at the ending note and it fits perfectly with the resolution, and I feel like, oh, that was cool. And then sometimes I hit 60% of the notes wrong, you know?
So Charles and Charlie both got it. 93, Archie guessed 94. Everyone's right on it. Yeah, Charles, 93. Did you know what you were hearing?
I mean, I knew it was Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, and I know pretty sure Vince brought that into the band. So, I heard Vince in there. So, that drum sound, again, there's like 93, it starts to change, really 94, 95. The drums are kind of muscular. There's like they sound cool to me. I like it. They have an edge to them. So, didn't hear that full edge to the drums. It was starting to get to that point. So yeah, 93 is what I guessed. Playing the game a little bit, and I was really thinking 94, but I didn't, be safe, be in the middle somewhere. So
It's like in Jeopardy when they have a decent lead and you get double Jeopardy. Like, yeah, I'm going to keep it at 2000 there.
it's a little conservative there. Yeah. I'll admit.
Right on. Charlie, you seem to be like boom or bust. Either you like nail a really hard one or you're off. Nice pull, 93.
I know I'm a very polarizing player. I mean, I knew it was the 90s, and I was almost certain that Brent wasn't in there. And I knew it was, and Jerry sounded pretty decent, relatively healthy. And then I was trying to think of, there's like several YouTube thumbnails that are like burned into my brain. Yeah. The duality of my choices is extreme.
Hey, nice pull. And Arch at 94.
Yeah, I knew the song debuted in 93, like early 93. And I know that the band ended 95, so I just split the difference, 94. I'm like, the most I can get is 1 year off.
Playing the game. Yeah, before we go on to the fifth and possible final song, Tom, how did you get into the Dead?
I was introduced to folk music really when I was a kid. My parents were kind of New York City folkies in the 50s and early 60s or 50s. So they had introduced me to Woody Guthrie, Pete Seeger, the Weavers, sort of all that history music there. And I liked it. I thought it was interesting. It was kind of cool as I was growing up. My older brother was into the Beatles and the Who and the Stones, and that really spoke to me. So I still like all that kind of music. And then I went to summer camp and I met this guy, and I had taken some group guitar classes in my junior high, and like we all did. And I thought it was fun. It was interesting. And I wasn't really, getting any better than your average 13-year-old, So at summer camp, this guy just played a couple of Dead tunes from the anthology book. He had it with him. And he played Box of Rain, I remember, and he played Uncle John's. And I thought, well, I wonder if I could change chords that fast. And that summer I did. I just picked up his guitar and I did. I'm like, oh, I can do this. And this music was great. And this is what now? Okay. So honestly, I could play, and I heard him play these songs, this guy named Larry, and I'm still in touch with him. But I heard him play before I ever heard the Dead's version. So I heard Larry's versions of these songs, and I'm like, they're pretty good. And Friend of the Devil was in there too. And I'm like, but these are great songs. And these songs were kind of, when I got home and I bought Working Man's Dad, I remember sitting on the floor of my parents' living room and singing and playing Uncle John's, changing chords really fast. And my mom was like, wow, you're totally different. This is the whole new thing for you. And I was like, yeah, I guess I can do this now. And then I heard the versions on the tape, and I thought, because that's what I bought, that's what I had the money to buy at the time, the Working Man's Dead on a tape. And I thought, this is what I've been searching for. This is the bridge between like the rock music that I really liked and the pop, the Beatles sounding pop music into that folk tradition as well. And then, of course, I got Europe 72, and then I got Live Dead. It was in that order. And, you guys know Live Dead is, of course, a whole different world. And I thought, this is like nothing I've ever heard before. I want to learn more about this. That's sort of the story. I got into it through playing, and then my playing just kind of took off from there into all these Dead tunes. But I couldn't do like Hotel California and all the songs that all the other guitarists could play. I was no fun at parties. I couldn't really play the stuff that everybody could sing along to. Although my elder brother is very good at that. And he still is.
Okay, so one of the songs on your list, I decided was not technically a live show. And I want to play it now anyways, because for everyone listening, the contestants, no need to guess, welcome to. But yeah, let's hear it.
Oh, sweet mama, your daddy's got them deep bellum blues. When you go down to Deep Ellum, put your money in your pants. The women in Deep Ellum, they don't give a man a chance. Whoa, sweet mama, your daddy's got them Deep Ellum blues. Oh, sweet mama, your daddy's got them Deep Ellum blues.
That was a live performance with Bob and Jerry on Letterman in 1982. How do you decide if something is a show and thus worthy of inclusion on Grateful Stats, or a performance like this one on a talk show or like a charity event?
Well, I'm not sure that I do. Those are not distinguished in the data, unfortunately. That's maybe another thing I'd like to add. And yeah, there's plenty of benefits, but of course there's full shows that are benefits too, And there's like the couple of songs they did when Bill Graham passed away, right? They did a handful of songs in the park there. But I guess I did want to talk a little bit about this performance, right, on the Letterman show. It was April of 82. I was just kind of getting into the Dead. I was 16. And my buddy and I were, we were on the phone making sure we'd stay up late and see this. And I had a radio where I could record off of the TV. And that's how I have this on a tape somewhere, way back there in my house here. And it was just, I just thought, wow, I mean, you can have two guitar players and it's Jerry and Bob, of course, at the time. I didn't know too much history. I sort of, I was just getting into it. And staying up late, doing that recording and listening to that, I don't know how many hundreds of times, really helped me learn kind of 12-bar blues form and just kind of how the mechanics of doing lead and rhythm, and it was just really formative to me. And then hearing them do it and seeing them talk about the music that I was really interested in learning more about it was very formative, I guess.
Lovely pick, Tom. And I think it's a worthy debate. And you have one more pick for us. So let's hear it. Lazy Lightning at the Orpheum in San Francisco on July 18th, 1976. Great book.
Yeah, I was sort of a giveaway. We kind of wrote back and forth. And again, it's significant to me in my teenage development and getting into the Dead. I actually recorded this off one of the local rock stations in New York that was airing this for Bobby's birthday one year, 82, 83, whenever that was. I don't remember. But this was the first time I had heard it. And it really got me into the contrast between Bobby and Jerry. The timing was just so odd. The chords were so dissonant. I mean, I didn't even attempt to play this song until I was much older. Music is about expectations. It's about what you're going to hear next and what you think you're going to hear next. And when you hear that, like in bluegrass, it's boof, big applause line, right? But in many Bobby songs, you don't hear that. And you have to learn kind of the changes, and it grows on you. And then it's just this amazing thing. That was part of my learning about how this music works, was some of these almost dissonant chords that Bobby would put together, which just sounded beautiful. And it sounds weird saying that, because dissonance by definition is not beautiful, right? Like the timing of the other one, let's say, what is it, Archit? I'm sure you know what that timing is.
It's like, it's something crazy. How about that?
It is something crazy, but
it does prove your point.
If I saw that on a score written in music, I would be like, there's no way I could beat this out or clap my hands or get the timing right. But when I play it, I can do it, and it sounds, of course, not as good, but I can time it right because I just have this great feeling for it. And I learned that it's not all from written music that you can really enjoy, or you can really understand a lot of these weird, very non-Western kind of timings.
How do you think they were able to, use these odd time signatures like in the 11 and Estimated Profit and Lazy Lightning? But even for someone who can't articulate why it's impressive, like myself, it still seems correct. And not only correct, but like just pleasing.
That is a great question for an ethnomusicologist, and I don't think I'm qualified to answer that. I'm sorry, I just don't have a good answer for you. I appreciate the listening side, just like you do.
Charles and Archit.
Yeah, I mean, it's always cool to experiment with time signatures. And that one, I don't even know what Lazy Lightning is in.
It's in 7.
Is it at 7? Okay, so I think it's, and it can get too far out sometimes if you're doing it just for the sake of doing it. Like prog music in the 70s sometimes got a little too, when you lose the melodicism and you're just doing it to, we were talking about etiquette at a bluegrass jam, and it's like when somebody brings in a complicated jazz song, just to show off that they know it and you don't know it, they're trying to make you look bad, or they want themselves to look better. It's not good etiquette, so you can go too far with these things with time signatures. But Weird was very tasteful, like in the Grateful Dead in general, like their choices, when they did it right, and it wasn't just gratuitous. They kind of made it melodic, made it work, had a groove or to it. So that's why it worked, in my opinion.
Yeah, some of those, just the stuff the band was working on around 75 to 76, it's a weird peak I don't think they reached in terms of writing music, right? We can't forget, like, Unbroken Chain was also in 74, King Solomon's Marble 75. The band was clearly working with weird stuff. Unbroken Chain's Jam is in 15. King Solomon's Marbles is also in 7. Lazy Lightning's in 7. Supplications in 7. And I think they are really complicated songs that if you don't know them, you're gonna crash and burn, right? Like, unless you really, really have an understanding of Lazy Lightning, it's not gonna work out. It's in C, it's in A minor, then there's a weird like F chord in there, and then it goes E minor to F to G, and then Supplications, I think, in D, but the lyrics come in at F, and they come in at a weird spot. They come in like on the 4th beat, not at the beginning of the 7th. And I remember, if folks here are familiar with NAMM, the National Association of Music Merchandise, those big music conventions, it's been on my bucket list to go ever since I started playing music, and I was actually able to go a couple months ago. And I quite literally physically bumped into John Kadlicek from Further and all that stuff. And I've met him a couple times. I've seen him at a bunch of his Jerry Garcia band shows, the solo stuff, Latin Dead. I did the whole run and everything. And we're like chopping it up, talking about stuff. And it's weird because that day, as I was driving into Anaheim, which is where the convention was, I was listening to further shows and I wanted to ask him, or in my head, I was thinking about questions. I'm like, how did they do that? You know, how are you playing in 15? And then here is the guy I was pretty much listening to. And he said something and I still don't understand it. He's like, oh, with stuff like 11 and playing in the band and Unbroken Chain, he's like, we're just trying to get into the point where everyone's playing in one, 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 one. And I'm like, I have no idea what you mean. And he's like, dude, don't you know Mantica by Dizzy Gillespie? And I'm like, no. And he's like, oh, if you listen to that, that's pretty much exactly what I think some section of 11 or out of, or Unbroken Chain is out of. And it expands that genealogy, right? It's like, oh, now to understand this, I got to go there. And you will be told, like, yeah, playing in the band is in 10. And then you turn on any jam of playing in the band from like 74 to 79, and it doesn't sound like it's in anything. Everyone's just playing, I guess, but it doesn't sound like it's in 10. And I think the time signature stuff it'll always irk some people. And after Phil passed, the band had like all these different press releases, and they all repeatedly said, no, Phil was the one who turned all of us onto that sort of music. Phil was a better musician than all of us. And Mickey would say that over and over and over again. And if you go really, really deep into the ways in which they were formulating the 11, whether it was like Phil himself talking about the shows back in 69 or the whole Terrapin Clubhouse stuff he was running on YouTube prior to his passing, he would say like, no, the band was never really that good. And it irks me that he says that because the band was so good, right? But you are your best critic, right? And folks will say, yeah, everyone's doing something, but Phil will be the only one playing in 15, or he'll be the only one playing in 11. Or prior to them figuring out playing in the band, he'll be the only one playing in 10 during the main 10 jam that Mickey had. And it's just, we have to remember this was their job. You know, you're going to be good at your job. These are all very great musicians and instrumentalists. At times, they might not be the best singers, but even on the shows where Jerry has laryngitis or something, it's some of the best guitar playing you'll hear.
Beautiful. Archit and Charles both got it 76. Charlie gets 77. Everyone was right there. So Charles wins. He was only 1 year off over 5 songs. Damn, Charles. Take it away.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure meeting you guys, and good picks there, Tom. Yeah, I heard, like, I was going to go 77 because I think Lazy Lightning, I think 77. They must have played it a million times in 77. But then it sounded like an early kind of version, and it's hard for me to articulate, but 76 sounds different than 77. Like, just, you know, there's a little more clarity and space between the instruments. It's not as like smooth and nice as 77 is. So that's why I went with 76. But yeah, it's you know, been a pleasure playing. I'll throw in a little plug, you know, if anybody's interested to see what I'm doing, it's just charlesfulleracoustic.com. I'm on Facebook and stuff. But yeah, it's been a pleasure playing with you guys.
I'm really excited to check that out. Congrats. Yeah, Archit also 76. I saw you kind of battling with that.
I was in Portland for the first time in my life a couple weeks ago, and we're going around the Paramount Theater. I'm telling my girlfriend, take a picture of me. The Grateful Dead played here, and we're listening to only Paramount shows. And I know just off the top of my head that Lazy Lightning debuted at the Paramount alongside Supplication, of course, but also Samson and Delilah, and I think The Wheel. They all came at that same time. And the whole thing I was listening to, and Charles is absolutely right, 76 sounds very different from 77. 76, like, yeah, the instruments are spaced out. It feels more of a lullaby, you know, there's not really like a quick tempo. You go to certain 77 or 78 shows and Eyes of the World is like 40 times faster. And they would not have done that in 76, right? And I knew it was early. I just wasn't sure if it was early 77 or if it was like a late 76. But it sounded early enough to me, and Jerry's solo and some of the little fill hits, some of the stuff, it just felt like they were still trying to figure it out. And I believe you said it was the Orpheum Theater or something, and I'm pretty sure that probably was like later in San Francisco. I loved vicariously living through different SF shows when I lived out there. You're in the area, everyone wants to know how many shows there were in your city. And I had like 300 shows to listen to, all from San Francisco. And this was absolutely one of them. And yeah, I just knew it was 76. Just one of those gut feelings.
I used Grateful Stats today to figure out how many of the 1969 shows were in the Bay Area. And it was like 68 out of 120. So shout out Grateful Stats. Charlie, 77, right on it.
Yeah, I honestly it sounded slightly choppy. So I was like, maybe this is like those warm up shows that I think were in San Bernardino, maybe in 77, to be like super early in the year. So that was my guess. I thoroughly enjoyed that one. That one didn't make me poop in my pants at all. I felt pretty, I was closer to confident.
Speaking of pooping in pants, good luck to
You're going to be dealing with a lot of that.
Yeah.
Yes. I have to relieve my wife, who's been handling everything. But it was great meeting you guys.
Yeah, thank you, Charlie. Thank you, Archit. Thank you, Charles. Thank you, Tom, for really everything you do with Grateful Stats. I know it's a labor of love, and everyone can check it out via the link in the show notes. I use it a lot, and I'm sure you will too if you check it out. So thank you, Tom, for being here and doing what you do for the community.
Yes, thank you. Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm really glad I was able to bring this to life.
Thanks so much for listening. A link to our YouTube channel is in the show notes, as is the link to Grateful Stats. Thank you, Tom, again for coming on and curating a great set list. If you want to be a contestant on the show, sponsor the show, or make comments and ask questions, email us at info@guesttheyear.net. Shout out to Dylan, James, and Jack for helping out behind the scenes. Thank you so much for listening. Thanks to the amazing tapers whose recordings made this show possible. Congratulations to Charles on going back to back. And to our other contestants, thanks for playing. And remember, it's all one song anyway.
And I bid you good night. Good night. Good night. And I bid you good night. Good night. Good night.